On the first test drive of the TJ, we had some issues with the brakes, just not really being everything that we wanted them to be. Not completely surprised by that. We've got the front brakes off of a 2009 Dodge 1-ton pickup. We've got the rear brakes off of a 2002 Dodge 3/4 or 1-ton pickup. And it just seems like the factory brake booster and master cylinder in the Jeep are not pushing enough fluid to really make the brakes feel encouraging. They're there, they work, but if you really want to make the vehicle stop quick, there's just no sense of it being anything more than you need. That's the bad news. The good news is we have a kit here from Vanco Power Brake Supply to put a Hydroboost system into the TJ. What this does is it's really taking the brake system, master cylinder and booster, from a heavy-duty full-size pickup, real common particularly with diesel engines that don't have the vacuum system, and putting that into the TJ, which should give us a lot more brakes. This is not a bad arrangement. You order the kit from them. They include high pressure lines, low pressure lines, the master cylinder, the hydro booster, and a nice package of instructions on how the system works, how to put it together, how to plumb it, pictures, so on and so forth. Okay, this is the low pressure lines here with the push lock connectors, lines to adapt the master cylinder to the TJ, high pressure lines with the fittings unnecessary, adapter fittings for the steering box and everything else to connect to these. And what they're actually doing is they're adapting everything to, I think that's an AN6 fitting across the board. And this is the master cylinder here. This is out of a 1-ton GM truck, is what this is from. This is a brand new master cylinder that comes with the kit. And then the star of the show is the Hydroboost unit itself. And what this does is, instead of relying on brake vacuum to boost your brakes, it leverages hydraulic pressure from your power steering pump. So that means this has to be wired in, or plumbed into rather, the power steering system. What Vanco does is they modify and create a rod here to go to the brake pedal, and the adapter plate to mount this to the firewall on the Jeep. The sort of underlying thing, this is a pressure cylinder. This gives you a little bit of backup pressure in the event of an engine failure or hydraulics failure, to give you some additional brake boost assistance. And then again, the ports to plumb this into your hydraulic system. And a nice shipping thing here to keep pressure up, because they really don't want any pressure applied to the material, the rod there. So that's the system, that's the setup. Now, one of the things that's very important is to understand how the plumbing on this works. Fortunately, they do give us a picture or a diagram of how to plumb this in. So they give us this diagram, and what we see when we start looking at this is, so we've got our pump, and the high pressure line from the pump comes out here to the Hydroboost. And then there is a return line from the Hydroboost back to the pump, as well as a high pressure line from the Hydroboost that comes down to our steering box. And then the return line from the steering box up through the cooler and back to the power steering pump. In the case of this Jeep, we already have a PSC hydraulic assist steering system. So my return loop from the box already consists of coming up off the box through the cooler and up to a power steering reservoir that has multiple inlets or multiple return ports. So my return loop does not need to be modified. I will need to create a new return loop into one of the other outlets, or inlets, I guess, from the Hydroboost, and I need to now run a new high pressure line from the pump to the Hydroboost and from the Hydroboost to the steering box. The way this starts with all other projects is disassemble the pieces we don't need. I pulled the high pressure line from the steering box to the pump off, and I've let that set and drain and drip to let the system, for the most part, drain. And now we continue on with the process of removing the pieces we don't need. So the box side of that initial high pressure line, and then we'll start dismantling the old brake system. So taking the high pressure line, old high pressure line off the steering box. It just so happens that on this vehicle and the way it's set up, I have access to it right here above the bumper. This has just been a conversation about what size bolt is it. On this one, it's an 18 millimeter. I was just noting the apparent color. I'm thinking, that's interesting. I think that's just an optical delusion. The end of the hose is kind of shaped like a fish hook, so it does a nice job of grabbing and snagging on everything. And based on the instructions, this is basically a set it aside and forget it, because we won't be reusing this hose. So, having now pulled the original off, we have our collection of adapters that are the replacement pieces. Looking at the fittings that I have, this is the one that looks most like it should be a replacement for what just came off. And it's a very similar end with the O-ring to the fitting that just came off of the steering box. This end is the AN6 that is the adapter or the fitting that all of the Vanco hoses use. Just give the O-ring a little bit of a coating in power steering fluid before you install it, just to help lubricate it as it seats in. And then it goes into the steering box where the high pressure line came from. Once you've got the fitting in there, snug it down. Vanco says 20 foot-pounds maximum torque. They don't want these over tightened. They don't want to damage the O-ring for the seals. So in the interest of kind of controlling fluid loss and travel and making sure I can actually get this in with the aftermarket box that's in there, these are the high pressure lines that Vanco provides with the kit. They're terminated on one end, field terminated on the other to the appropriate length for your application. The idea here is feed this up and through and get it up high. They provide two of them. One will be the high pressure line to the steering box. The other is the high pressure line to the Hydroboost. get a Jeep with 40-inch tires, it comes with a built-in step. So that needs to go to approximately that location via whatever path and route through your engine bay makes the most sense. Okay, so having routed this through and kind of dealing with what is behind here, I've got materials associated with my radiator, I believe, that are interfering with where the steering line wants to go. It's going to require things to be a different angle, different shape than what is convenient. So I have a problem when I try to go straight back with the hose bracketry encountering the support for the radiator there. So I think I'm going to need to route my hose up and through this area and through this opening up here to the side. So to try to make this a little easier, I'm going to pre-route it in that space. That's not the hose I needed.
It's not the hose you were looking for.
Oh. Bumper for better access to the front of the Jeep. So this is about creating more pathway between the steering box and through the fire or through the past the radiator here. Continuing the teardown to put the Vanco in here, I've removed some of the stuff that was in this place, relocated the cruise control for the time being. The way this is going to work, these hard lines are going to be replaced completely. They're going to be deleted, but we are keeping the proportioning valve that is here. So we need to disconnect these hard lines from the proportioning valve. The rear one here, I don't think we can access while the master cylinder is in place. So we're going to remove the connectors or remove the hard lines from the master cylinder first, and then we'll remove from the proportioning valve once we have access to them. There is a vacuum booster line that runs from this port on the 4-liter to the vacuum booster port. We've pulled that hose off and then capped the vacuum port on the manifold. So next up, grab a couple of flare wrenches. Give them a good coat of penetrating oil. Work them out. Flare wrenches are the right tool for the job.
12 millimeter in this case.
In this case, it seems to be a 12 millimeter, yeah. This is going to lose fluid. Remember that brake fluid will eat any paint that it comes in contact with. So whatever you can do to capture, contain, grab a turkey baster, drain the master cylinder to the best of your, or the reservoir to your best of your ability. Remember that brake fluid and power steering fluid are different things.
Yep.
I think making this easier, I'm trying to minimize fluid loss and kind of get the master cylinder stage to come out. And we've got to get it out in order to get access to the bottom side of those brake hard lines anyway.
Yeah, and there's two bolts holding the whole assembly together. There's a bolt or a nut that goes on the outside holding the bracket for the proportioning valve, and then there's another nut holding the master cylinder on in place. And so getting all of that off is just get in there with a box end wrench and turn and turn.
Yeah. And this is a, what, 25-year-old Jeep at this point. These have been here for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the two screws holding that on. Now
Nuts.
Two nuts. Okay. And that is a master cylinder.
And we'll sit it this direction, keep it from leaking everywhere.
To dismount the brake booster, we need to disconnect it from the pedals. So up in here, we have a retaining clip and 4 bolts. It's going to be almost impossible to video pulling these out. So just what I'm going to do is remove the clip, slide the rod off the end of the pedal, and then take the 4 bolts out that hold the pedal in place. So you remove the 4 bolts and the clip from the inside, and after that the booster just comes forward and out of the vehicle. It is a little bit of a game of trying to jockey it around brake lines and reinforcements and everything else, but work with a little bit, it does slide forward.
This PSC bracket for the reservoir, you can see that it just bolts here in place exactly like that. And then with the new Vanco Hydroboost, you see that it's not quite wide enough, and so we're going to have to maybe open up this hole, maybe see if we can stretch it, but we're going to have to do that with this and also with the bracket for the proportioning valve that's in the Jeep. And so we'll get in there and make sure that these can fit on there. That's our next step.
So that fits, gives us just a little bit of play to work with.
Yeah, and this is wallowed out a little bit, but it's all going to be sandwiched in with other pieces. And
it's just holding a cylinder or a reservoir,
yeah,
so it's
not carrying a lot of stress on it.
Doesn't carry a lot of weight or stress. Dismounted the proportioning valve because we're going to have to clearance this so that it'll fit on this new master cylinder. We're just going to need to open up the perimeter. Now it's interesting because there is this little nub on the bottom, so just exactly where we sit, I think as long as this is tight against the master cylinder, although when we put our other bracket in place, we want to keep it back as far as we can as well.
Right.
So we may find between the two of them we have to clearance to allow for that nub. But the idea is to clearance the bracket and open up the holes so that it will sit underneath the new master cylinder. Next step is bench bleeding the master cylinder. And so what we've done is we've got the master cylinder, we just got it stabilized. We've taken the lines and fittings that Vanco gives us, went ahead and put the adapter fittings into the master cylinder and have attached the lines and then just a loop back. And the idea here is to carefully push the plunger in no more than 3/4 of the way.
Okay.
And
it's just sitting on top of the vise, so you need to hold it.
Yep.
So let's see how much effort this takes. It is a fair amount of effort.
Okay. And does it spring back on its own?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Actually, April, can you grab the blue bottle of brake fluid over there? Because yeah, there's going to be your level is going to go down a little bit. Push until the bubbles stop coming out, really.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of this is we're actually filling up these hoses at the same time, but it's also a very good idea to have the hoses down in the fluid, so when it sucks fluid back, when you let off the piston, it pulls fluid in instead of air. Looks like we're mostly down to small bubbles.
How far in do you think you're pushing?
Oh, I don't even know if I'm going halfway.
Well, I mean by measurement. Like a half inch?
He's getting to, yeah, probably a 1/2 inch of travel here.
Half inch, yeah. I mean, this is a heavy spring.
Sure.
So we're going to assemble all the pieces here on the tire. It's just much easier to put everything together, fit everything together outside of the vehicle.
Actually, slide that out of the way, or lift him up. And so this bracket, this PSC bracket, is not going to fit once the master cylinder is in place, so we have to assemble them together at the same time.
Yep.
And then, okay, and you are on.
Yep.
The nice thing about here is that we can tilt the whole thing up, and I've got full access with a lot of turning radius, so I can tighten this down a lot easier. If it was in the Jeep, I'd be hitting the intake manifold and
Fender well.
and I'd be cursing and saying lots of mean words about people's heritage. But here it's nice.
The downside is we will still have to make the brake line connections to the
Right. So
3 ports on the proportioning valve.
But we have to do that in the vehicle anyway.
Yep. Okay.
And we are assembled.
We are assembled. Now, we did have to bend this bracket slightly to make sure that we could get clearance to be able to open the cap on the reservoir. So this ships out with this protective cone over the back end. The idea here is to not allow this to be pushed when it shouldn't be, but also to keep it straight. So as we get into our install, that has to be removed. We want this, when it's all said and done, to be straight out of the back of the Hydroboost, not at an angle. And there is some play given in the bracket to allow it to move up and down, side to side, to help us make sure that this is straight when it's all lined up.
And as I'm looking at this, the bracket came with 2 different sizes of bolts, types of bolts. One of the things, and if you could move away real quick, there is, you can see the structure in here. is more layers stamped together, and so I think the shouldered bolt is going to want to go on this side, and the non-shouldered bolt will probably go just fine on this side. And this this is different than the vacuum booster. On the vacuum booster, there are 4 studs that stick out of the back. This bracket just has holes that the bolts go into, and so it's going to be a little bit of finagling stuff out of the way to get this put together.
And this is very much a two-man job. They make it very clear in their instructions. Go find a helper.
Right. So to make this installation a little easier, we're gonna slide this prop bar, whatever bar,
Support bar,
bar out of place. That will give us more room to maneuver around, and because when we were taking everything out, we were hitting the fittings here, and if the fittings weren't here, we'd still hit the bar. So. Am I on the right side?
Yeah, there's one. I got a nut in the start.
Okay.
Well, the nut's running away from me. And the bolt.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got the one that you think is hard.
Well, the one that's farthest away from me.
Yeah. Give me a minute and I'll start the other one.
Okay. And here, let me see if I can get the bolt a little bit further into you. This would be a lot easier if it had studs.
Okay, so I've got that top corner one started.
Okay, I'm going on the other side top.
Okay, last one.
Okay. And yeah, this is absolutely a two-person job. I'm helping, really.
Okay, I have them all started.
They're all started. Okay, we have a couple of fitment issues to deal with here. Yeah, there's no way this reservoir is going to fit where it is.
Okay, so then the next thing to do is remove this piece from this bracket. So then the reservoir, and we can deal with if we have to.
Right. So the problem we're dealing with here is that on this master cylinder with this kit, we've got this fitting over here that sticks out way too far, and the reservoir is not going to fit where it sits right now. And so we're going to take the bracket off, and we're going to creatively engineer something.
The Hydroboost is attached to the firewall, and now working through repositioning the reservoir as well as the plumbing that is necessary to make this work. So we've disconnected the rest of the hoses from our reservoir and kind of working through where exactly the reservoir needs to sit with respect to the new Hydroboost. It is sitting a little bit further out and over, and again, conflict with the brake lines has forced us to kind of move this over from where it was. Having now routed the hoses, mounted the reservoir, just connect the high pressure hose from the pump to the unit. Tighten everything up.
Okay. These are AN fittings, so they don't have to be super tight.
Okay.
And do you tighten the ones on the steering box?
And I did tighten the ones on the steering box.